Ladies and gentlemen, the Newton Nomadic Theater presents Story Slam.
So I was one of those girls who did not dream about my wedding my whole life. And I also didn't think about having children. I wasn't sure if that was to be my destiny. I also will say, unrelated, but it will tie in later, that I am a little bit obsessed with biographies and shows on WGBH about triumph over tragedy. I get fascinated by those shows, and I sit on the couch with my blanket and my glass of wine, and I question if I was faced with these adversities, would I do the things these people are doing? And I often feared I would not, as I sat on the couch. So I met my husband, and realized that I could imagine myself being married. And shortly thereafter, I realized that I really wanted to have children with this man, and that I could imagine myself maybe be a mother, even though I didn't dream about it my whole life. It was something that I really wanted. And so we decided to have children, and it took a little longer than we'd hoped, but eventually we had twins, who are now 13. And the day I was coached by many pregnant women and folks who had had babies that said, you know, you're going to have twins. When you get in that hospital, the Brigham and Women's Spa, make sure that you put those babies in the nursery overnight because you're going to need to sleep. And this wasn't popular with some moms who said, never let that baby leave your side. But I love sleep, and I thought that this was probably good advice. So after I had these babies, it was a wild day, and then in the evening the nurse came, and they were underweight, so we needed to make sure they were eating. And the nurse came and said, I'm going to bring them to the nursery, and I will feed them during the night, and I'll bring them back in the morning for you to feed them. And I said, thank you. And I fell right asleep. And the next morning, the nurse came busting in at 6 o'clock in the morning to get me up, and she said, I have wonderful news. Marty took 2 ounces last night. And I opened my eyes, and I thought, who is Marty? And I didn't say it out loud. But I worried at that point that maybe I didn't have the chip that these moms had. Maybe something was missing in me. And I will tell you, and I've never admitted this to anyone, I worried about that for a long time. Because sometimes, you know, I would forget what I was supposed to be and things like that, and worried that it was a reflection on my motherhood. So we moved to Newton, and my girls were born on April 1st, which brings a lot of laughs. And they get on their 6th birthday, which we had moved to Newton, they get bicycles with handbrakes. And that's a big deal because they had those pedal bikes that brake differently. So they get these bicycles with handbrakes. And then on Mother's Day, I get a bicycle because my husband thinks it would be wonderful if we could become this biking family. And so we all get helmets, and it's May 14th, and it's warmer than it should be. And we don't know Newton because we've just moved here. And we live on Walnut Street, so you all know what Walnut Street's like. So we decided we're going to all take a bike ride, but we're going to get off Walnut Street because that seems a bit dicey. So we go up and behind Walnut Street, and we have a destination to get to somewhere in Newtonville, but we don't really know where we're going, but we just figured we're going to be able to figure this out. And so I'm a little bit ahead of them, and we're not exactly cohesive, and it's very clear at some point this bike ride is way too ambitious for us, and we are in over our head. So I'm significantly in front of my daughters, and the next part of the story probably takes place in 10 seconds, but I tell you, it felt like 10 minutes. So I'm significantly in front of my daughters, and we're going down this steep hill, and I want to get to the bottom just to see what's at the bottom. And when I get to the bottom, I realize there's a blind turn, and there is Walnut Street, so that you are going to go down this hill and land right onto Walnut Street. And so behind me, and again, this all happens in 30 seconds, I hear my daughter Ella, who's here, just start screaming as she's coming down the hill saying, I can't brake. And she's flying down Walnut Street and just screaming at this ear-piercing screech. And my husband, who I can barely hear, is giving her instructions, God bless him, to squeeze the handles. And at that moment, I take my bike, and I didn't know I had it in me, and I throw it to the side, and I say, this is gonna fucking hurt. And I brace myself in the middle of the street as the bike is coming at me. And I think to myself, this is going to really hurt. But she's not going to end up on Walnut Street. And then my husband's still giving her instructions, and she's screaming at the top of her lungs, and about a foot in front of me, she just stops. She just stops. And she gets off her bike, and I get back on my bike, and we all regroup as a family, and we walk down to Walnut Street, and that's that. And then I know I had it in me. I had it in me.